Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal at General Hospital, secrets never stay buried for long, and now, the walls are closing in on several staff members whose hidden truths may soon cost them everything. Recent leaks from behind the scenes suggest that as many as 3 hospital employees could be on the chopping block, their positions in jeopardy as past mistakes and present deceptions begin to surface. With tensions rising and trust eroding among the team, the looming threat of termination is no longer just a rumor, it's a ticking time bomb. As these medical professionals scramble to protect their reputations, one question echoes through the halls of Port Charles: who will be the next to fall when the truth finally comes out? First, Porsche Robinson had once walked the halls of General Hospital with poise, precision, and a reputation built on years of medical dedication. As co-chief of staff, she carried not only the authority of her title but the expectations of an entire institution. Yet beneath the polished exterior, Porsche had slowly begun to unravel a web of deceit that, if fully exposed, could not only end her career but permanently stain her name in the medical field. For months, she had been caught in a silent, corrosive entanglement with Drew Kane, an entanglement that began as a compromise and evolved into outright complicity. At first, Drew's demands came in subtle waves, suggestions veiled in favor, professional courtesy blurred with personal leverage. But soon, the requests became more pointed, more direct, edging into ethically gray territory that Porsche found harder and harder to rationalize. When he discovered inconsistencies in the hospital's research data linked to a pharmaceutical trial Heather Weber had been involved in, Drew realized he had a bargaining chip. He implied that the only way to keep things quiet, and protect Porsche's seat of power, was to play along. That was the beginning of Porsche's descent. What started as a one-time data adjustment evolved into a series of cover-ups. Porsche had manually overridden the results of Heather's psychological and toxicological exams, creating the illusion of chemical interference that could excuse some of Heather's violent behavior. Porsche told herself it was to give the hospital time to figure out the truth, to protect its liability, to protect patients. But the truth was more complicated, and far more selfish. Porsche feared that if the full extent of Heather's condition were made public, it would expose weaknesses in their clinical oversight, which might reflect directly on her leadership. And more dangerously, it would also risk unraveling the quiet alliance she'd made with Drew, who had been funneling information to her about internal investigations, pending audits, and suspicious inquiries into hospital financials. In exchange, she helped Drew obscure traces of his involvement in a side operation involving narcotics, an off-the-books pharmaceutical trial that used hospital resources to distribute experimental medications with questionable FDA compliance. The drugs were labeled as part of legitimate pain management studies, but the paper trail had been deliberately obscured. While Porsche thought she had covered every detail, deleted logs, adjusted timestamps, encrypted files, the digital world rarely forgets. Unknown to her, an internal security update had begun autologging all administrative changes at a deeper level of the system. Her login credentials had been flagged more than once for accessing restricted files outside authorized hours, and someone on the hospital board had quietly opened an inquiry. What Porsche didn't know was that a whistleblower, a junior lab technician, had been gathering data and screenshots for weeks, disturbed by the irregularities and quietly feeding them to HR and legal counsel. Porsche's actions weren't merely administrative errors or clinical oversights. They were violations of medical ethics and legal boundaries. And in a hospital where every step is documented, audited, and backed by protocol, her trail was beginning to glow with damning clarity. The implications were severe. By altering Heather's medical records, she may have influenced a criminal case. By participating in Drew's operation, she may have aided in the illegal distribution of controlled substances. These were not just grounds for termination, they were grounds for prosecution. Within the hospital, whispers had started. Nurses were wondering why certain medication inventories didn't align. Pharmacists began flagging orders that had been rerouted or cancelled with no explanation. Porsche's absence from morning briefings and her sudden increase in closed-door meetings with Drew hadn't gone unnoticed either. Even Curtis, her husband, had begun to notice the change in her demeanor. restlessness, defensiveness, and a layer of guilt that seemed to hover just beneath her professional facade. Now, with mounting pressure, Portia's role as co-chief of staff is hanging by a thread. If the board proceeds with formal disciplinary actions, she could be placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation. But worse still, if charges are filed, tampering with medical records, obstruction of justice, complicity in drug distribution. Her medical license would be in serious jeopardy. Years of study, service, and reputation could vanish in a storm of legal fallout and public disgrace. And what of Drew? While he has worked in the shadows, manipulating systems and people alike, there's no guarantee he won't turn on Portia to save himself. If faced with indictment, he could present Portia as the mastermind behind the altered files and claim coercion. In a court of law or in the court of public opinion, her word against his may not be enough to save her. As the walls close in, Portia is forced to confront a devastating truth. The choices she made, however justified in her mind at the time, were built on a foundation of fear, pride, and compromise. She did not act as a protector of patients or a steward of ethics, she acted as someone who feared losing her power more than she feared losing her integrity. And now, she may lose both. Her future, once defined by accolades and opportunity, is now clouded with uncertainty. Behind the hospital doors, tension thickens. The board is scheduled to meet in closed session. Legal teams have been summoned. Licensure review boards have been notified. If the dominoes fall, Portia could be the first, but not the last. For in Port Charles, no secret stays buried forever. And when the truth comes to light, redemption may not come soon enough to save what's already been lost. As the storm that has been quietly gathering now threatens to consume everything Portia Robinson has built, she finds herself standing alone at the precipice of a reckoning she long thought she could avoid. For years, she had cultivated a reputation of excellence, an accomplished physician, a respected co-chief of staff, a voice of reason in a hospital often torn between politics and patient care. Yet the very skills that once defined her, precision, decisiveness, and control, have now been weaponized by circumstance and compromised by her own moral missteps. Portia's descent was not born of malice but of fear, the fear of losing credibility, of losing her position, of losing the respect that took decades to earn. She had told herself that each decision she made was a temporary deviation from the path, a necessary evil to protect a greater good. But in protecting that image, she lost sight of the sacred trust placed in her by her patients, her colleagues, and the profession itself. The falsified records, the complicity in Drew's drug operation, the deliberate obstruction of truth, all of it was stitched together in silence, bound by the illusion that if no one ever found out, the damage didn't exist. But it did. And now it is radiating outward, threatening to burn through every thread of her career. Within the hospital, the consequences are already rippling. Her colleagues are no longer just whispering, they are asking questions in closed meetings, cross-checking her past decisions, reviewing every signed report, every cleared trial, every executive order she endorsed. The trust she once inspired has turned to caution, to fear, even to resentment. Young residents who once looked to her as a mentor now avoid eye contact. Department heads who once sought her counsel are holding emergency meetings without her presence. Her name, once associated with order and discipline, now floats in every conversation paired with words like investigation, breach, and suspension. The board, though silent in the press, has already begun legal consultations. An internal audit is underway, and compliance officers have started combing through hospital databases. Each digital trace, each login, each file alteration leaves a footprint. And every footprint is leading straight back to Portia. She knows it's only a matter of time before a formal hearing is called, perhaps even a public announcement. And when that moment comes, the headlines will be merciless. General Hospital Scandal, Co-Chief of Staff under investigation. The fallout won't stop at her resignation. The State Medical Board has already been notified. Her license is at stake, and the whispers of possible criminal charges have begun to take shape behind closed doors. But beyond the institutional ramifications lies something deeper, more personal, Portia's own sense of identity. She had always believed in structure, in responsibility, in the sanctity of her oath. Now, confronted with the ruins of those beliefs, she must confront who she has become. Not the title. Not the doctor. But the woman behind the decisions. She must look into the mirror and face the truth that she crossed a line not because she was forced, but because she chose to. And no amount of justifications, no defense about pressure, manipulation, or necessity, can change the fact that she betrayed everything she once vowed to uphold. In the days to come, Portia will be forced to answer not only to the hospital board and to the licensing authorities, but to her family, her patients, and most painfully, to herself. Her marriage, already strained, may collapse under the weight of secrets revealed. Her daughter may grow up questioning what integrity means in a world where even the most noble can fall. And Portia, once the epitome of control, will finally understand what it means to surrender, to admit wrongdoing, to face public disgrace, and to reckon with the lasting cost of silence and complicity. No one knows yet how far the fallout will reach. Perhaps Drew Kane, too, will be exposed. Perhaps other secrets buried deep within the hospital's underbelly will rise to the surface, dragged into the light by the chain reaction her downfall has triggered. But for Portia Robinson, the question is no longer whether her career can be saved. That question has already passed. The only question that remains is whether she has the strength to stand in the ruins of her legacy and begin again, not as a leader, not as a doctor, but as a human being seeking redemption. And in Port Charles, where the line between hero and villain is always shifting, that may be the most difficult road of all. Second, Willow Tate's once stable position at General Hospital now stands on the edge of a precarious downfall, threatened by a series of deeply troubling incidents that have caused many to question her judgment, her emotional stability, and ultimately, her fitness to continue practicing medicine. As a nurse and former educator who had overcome a tragic and complex past, Willow had always been seen as a figure of quiet resilience, someone who had turned personal trauma into compassionate care. However, recent events have cast a long shadow over that narrative, and the image of the calm, collected professional she worked so hard to uphold is beginning to crack under pressure. The first major red flag came in the form of a highly alarming incident involving Daisy Gilmore, the infant daughter of Sasha Gilmore and Cody Bell. Hospital protocol requires the utmost precision and vigilance when it comes to neonatal care and patient identification. Any deviation can lead to life-altering consequences. That's why it sent shockwaves through the staff when it was discovered that baby Daisy had been placed in the wrong nursery crib, far from the secure wing where she had originally been assigned. At first, this seemed like a tragic administrative error, a simple case of mistaken identity in a hectic environment. But as the investigation quietly unfolded, it quickly became clear that this was not a random accident. Lucas Jones and Felicia Scorpio, working together behind the scenes, uncovered inconsistencies in the internal access logs and nursery rotation schedules. Their findings pointed to a deliberate override of protocol, a decision that could only have come from someone with authorized access and personal motive. Suspicion inevitably began to circle Willow, who had been present during the shift change and was later observed in an unauthorized area of the maternity ward. More troubling, however, was Willow's behavior after the incident. Instead of clarifying her actions or showing remorse, she became increasingly withdrawn and defensive. Reports surfaced that she had been seen lingering around the Quartermain estate, watching over Daisy without the parents' knowledge or consent. Though she had previously formed a deep bond with the child, who was, for a brief and painful time, believed to be her own daughter. The boundaries of her role as a healthcare provider had clearly been crossed. Her visits to the estate were not medical in nature, nor were they scheduled check-ins. They were quiet, obsessive, and undocumented. Staff who once regarded Willow with admiration now voice growing concerns. Her once meticulous work habits have shown signs of deterioration. Colleagues note her arriving late to shifts, distracted during patient care, and uncharacteristically abrupt with families. More than once, she's been found sitting alone in staff lounges, lost in thought or visibly distressed. While compassion fatigue is not uncommon in the high-pressure environment of GH, Willow's recent behavior suggests something deeper, something unraveling inside her. There is speculation among hospital administrators that Willow may be experiencing a psychological breakdown or possibly grappling with unresolved trauma related to the loss of her biological child. Some even suspect that she may be projecting those unresolved emotions onto Daisy in a way that is becoming increasingly inappropriate and dangerous. The fear isn't only for Willow's well-being, but for the safety of the patients under her care. In a facility like General Hospital, where every second counts and trust is non-negotiable, there is very little room for unpredictability or personal bias, especially in pediatric care. Willow's continued access to vulnerable patients in this fragile state raises ethical concerns and serious liability risks. If she were to misinterpret a medical situation due to emotional instability or act outside her professional scope again, the consequences could be irreversible. Behind closed doors, the hospital board has already begun discussions about placing Willow on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. Some argue for compassion and intervention. After all, she has dedicated her life to serving others and has shown great empathy in the past. But others argue that the potential risk is too great. Even with counseling or a temporary suspension, the damage to her credibility may be permanent. Adding to the complexity is the role that Willow's personal life continues to play in the drama. Her tumultuous history with Michael Corinthos, the deep-seated tensions with Nina Reeves, and now the growing unease among the Quartermain family regarding her fixation on Daisy, all of it paints a picture of a woman spiraling just beneath the surface. What was once seen as strength and stoicism is now viewed by some as repression and denial, and those close to her fear what might happen if the emotional dam truly breaks. If the situation continues to deteriorate, and if additional infractions or emotional outbursts occur, Willow could be formally dismissed from her position. It wouldn't merely be a demotion or disciplinary action, it could spell the end of her entire medical career. The state nursing board could open a case against her for professional misconduct, particularly if evidence surfaces that she knowingly altered nursery assignments or violated patient privacy laws. She could lose her license, her identity as a nurse, and her place in the very hospital that once gave her purpose. In the halls of General Hospital, where scandal and redemption often exist side by side, Willow now finds herself at a terrifying crossroads. The woman who once healed others may now need healing herself, only this time, it might be too late to recover both her career and her sense of self. Her fate hangs in the balance, and with each passing day, the likelihood of a quiet resolution fades. If she cannot confront the fractures within her own heart, she may be forced to face the consequences of losing the only role that ever made her feel whole. Third, on the July 10th episode of General Hospital, longtime fan favorite Stella Henry found herself stepping into dangerous ethical territory. Territory that could very well result in the loss of her career and permanently damage her legacy. As a respected medical social worker at GH, Stella has always been known for her compassion, her steady moral compass, and her dedication to doing what's right, even when it's not easy. But in a moment of personal loyalty and emotional urgency, she may have crossed a line she can't walk back from. The revelation, quietly dropped in a conversation with Martin Gray, has the potential to explode into a full-blown scandal, placing Stella squarely among those now being quietly discussed behind closed doors as candidates for termination. It all began with a seemingly innocuous admission. In a private exchange with Martin Gray, a man she's grown to deeply respect and care for. Stella confessed that she had covertly manipulated the hospital's administrative system to reinstate his insurance coverage. The implications were staggering. While Martin expressed profound gratitude, Stella was visibly shaken, insisting that they not speak of it further. Her body language, her clipped tone, and her refusal to elaborate on the technicalities of what she had done all pointed to the depth of the risk she had taken. She wasn't exaggerating when she told Martin that both of them could be in serious trouble. This wasn't a harmless clerical fix, it was a breach of GH's electronic health record system and a violation of hospital policy, insurance regulations, and possibly even federal healthcare laws. For viewers familiar with the bureaucracy of hospital operations, the gravity of Stella's action cannot be overstated. In the age of digital security and tight compliance with HIPAA and Medicare protocols, accessing and altering any aspect of a patient's insurance data without authorization is a serious offense. These systems are closely monitored, with every action time-stamped and attached to specific credentials. Even if Stella had the technical know-how to mask her trail, modern auditing tools can reconstruct the chain of access. And if her changes were traced back to her ID or terminal, it would be irrefutable evidence of policy breach and misconduct.